The morning sky on Kepler 442b glowed an angry red as the dying star swelled larger each day. Hyunwoo pressed his face against the observation deck window, watching massive solar flares dance across the star's surface like deadly fireworks. His younger sister Nari tugged at his sleeve. "When are the big ships coming back?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Hyunwoo didn't answer. He couldn't tell her the truth, that the gleaming silver vessels of the Galactic Confederation had already come and gone, taking only a fraction of their people with them. 3 weeks earlier, the evacuation fleet had arrived with great fanfare. Captain J, a stern-faced officer from the advanced Corvani species, had addressed the Zelani leadership through holographic projectors. His cold blue eyes swept across the gathered crowd as he explained the selection criteria for evacuation. Military potential, technological advancement, strategic value. Captain J had listed these requirements like items on a shopping list. The Confederation can only allocate limited resources. We must prioritize species that can contribute to galactic defense. Elder Vethara, her silver hair flowing like starlight, had stepped forward with dignity despite the insult. "We offer knowledge of sustainable living, peaceful conflict resolution, and harmony with nature. Surely these have value." Captain J's expression hadn't changed. "Philosophy doesn't win wars, Elder. Your people have no weapons, no military. Technology, no strategic importance. The Confederation has determined that evacuation resources are better spent elsewhere." The selection process had been brutal. Only 50,000 Zelani, those with rare genetic markers or specialized scientific knowledge, were deemed worthy of rescue. Families were torn apart as children were selected, but parents left behind. Husbands and wives were separated by arbitrary genetic tests. The chosen ones begged to stay with their families, but Confederation soldiers forced them onto the ships with shocking efficiency. Young Dae-hyun had been among the selected, his aptitude for quantum mathematics making him valuable. His parents, simple farmers who had raised him with love and patience, were classified as expendable. The boy's screams echoed across the landing platform as soldiers dragged him toward the evacuation ship while his mother collapsed in grief. "Please," she had begged Captain J directly, "take me instead. I'll work in the ship's kitchens, clean the floors, anything. Just let my son stay with his family." Captain J hadn't even looked at her. "The decision is final. Genetic value cannot be transferred." Now nearly 2 million Zelani remained on their dying world, crowded into makeshift camps around the few remaining atmospheric processors that still functioned. The air grew thinner each day as the planet's systems failed under the increasing solar radiation. Food supplies, never meant to last this long, dwindled rapidly. Min-Soo worked tirelessly in the engineering bay, trying to extend the life of their failing technology with spare parts and desperate improvisation. His hands shook from exhaustion as he welded another patch onto a critical air recycler. Around him, other Zelani engineers performed similar miracles, buying precious days of life for their people. The refugee camps stretched for kilometers across the planet's surface. Families huddled together in temporary shelters made from salvaged materials, sharing blankets and stories to keep their spirits alive. Children played games in the dust, their laughter a defiant sound against the approaching doom. Yoon-hee organized food distribution, carefully rationing their dwindling supplies. Each meal grew smaller, but she made sure the youngest children ate first. Her own stomach gnawed with hunger, but she smiled warmly as she handed out portions, never letting the children see her despair. At night, when the red star hung like a malevolent eye in the sky, Elder Vethara would gather the people for evening prayers. Her voice carried across the camps, strong and unwavering despite everything they faced. "We are not abandoned by the universe," she would say, her words floating on the thin air. "Love is stronger than fear, hope more powerful than despair. Somewhere, among the stars, someone will hear our call." Many scoffed at her optimism. How could she maintain such faith when death approached with mathematical certainty? But others found comfort in her words, drawing strength from her unshakable belief that goodness existed somewhere in the vast cosmos. The Confederation ships had vanished into hyperspace, carrying their selected few to safety while leaving the rest to face extinction. Captain J's final transmission had been coldly clinical. Remaining population classified as acceptable losses. Fleet proceeding to next evacuation zone. As the dying star pulsed brighter each day, casting everything. In hellish red light, the abandoned Zilani prepared to face their fate with whatever dignity they could muster. Helder Vethara stood at the highest point in the main camp, gazing up at the stars with unwavering hope, believing against all logic that someone, somewhere, would prove that compassion still existed in the galaxy. The red giant star pulsed like a diseased heart in the sky, each beat bringing waves of deadly radiation that made the very air shimmer with heat. Ji-hoon wiped sweat from his forehead as he checked the atmospheric processor readings for the third time that morning. The numbers kept getting worse. "How long do we have?" asked So Young, her medical uniform stained with grease from helping with repairs. "Maybe 2 weeks before the radiation kills the last processors," Ji-hoon replied, his voice hollow. "After that, we'll have maybe 6 hours of breathable air left." The food situation was becoming desperate. What had been carefully rationed meals were now small handfuls of grain and processed protein bars that tasted like cardboard. Young Ho managed the food distribution center, and each day he watched the supplies shrink while the hungry faces multiplied. "Mama, my tummy hurts," whispered little Han-Nul, tugging at her mother's torn dress. Her mother, Su-jin, knelt down and hugged her daughter close. "I know, sweetheart. Just a little longer, okay? Tomorrow we'll have more food." She spoke the lie with a gentle smile, knowing their reserves would last maybe 5 more days if they kept cutting portions. The water recycling systems were failing too. Min Jung and her engineering team worked around the clock, but they were fighting a losing battle against equipment never designed to handle this much stress. Every day brought new breakdowns, and they were running out of spare parts to cannibalize from other systems. Then the scavengers came. The first ship arrived. Without warning, a rust-colored vessel covered in mismatched armor plating. It landed near the abandoned spaceport and immediately began tearing apart the Confederation's leftover equipment. The Zilani watched in horror as the aliens, tall, insect-like creatures with 4 arms, dismantled valuable atmospheric scrubbers and power generators. Taemin approached the scavenger captain, a particularly large creature with scarred chitin and glowing red eyes. "Please," he begged in broken galactic standard. "We need those machines to survive. Our people are dying." The captain didn't even look at him. It continued directing its crew to strip copper wiring from a critical life support relay. When Taemin tried to physically stop one of the workers, a massive claw backhanded him across the face, sending him sprawling in the dust. More scavenger ships arrived over the following days. They came like vultures, picking apart anything of value while completely ignoring the desperate Zilani. Some ships landed right in the middle of refugee camps, forcing families to flee, as the aliens tore down shelter materials to get at metal supports underneath. Kyung-soo watched his home get demolished by a crew of reptilian scavengers. His family's small shelter, built from salvaged materials over weeks of careful work, was destroyed in minutes for a few kilograms of aluminum plating. "Animals!" spat Inwoo, clenching his fists as another scavenger ship roared overhead. "They're treating us like we're already dead." The breaking point came when a group of bat-like aliens began dismantling one of the last functioning water purifiers. Without it, thousands would die of thirst within days. A crowd of desperate Zilani gathered around the worksite, pleading and begging the creatures to stop. The alien foreman, hanging upside down from the machinery, chittered something that might have been laughter. It resumed cutting through vital pipes with a plasma torch, while contaminated water poured onto the ground. Woo Jin couldn't watch anymore. "We have to stop them," he shouted to the crowd. "If we all rush them together, maybe we can take their ship. Get some of our people off this world." It was madness born of desperation, but dozens of Zilani joined him. They charged the scavenger worksite, hoping to overwhelm the aliens through sheer numbers. For a moment, it seemed like it might work. Then the scavengers opened fire. Energy. Weapons crackled through the air, dropping Zilani left and right. The aliens didn't aim to kill, that would be wasteful, but their stun weapons left bodies twitching and convulsing in the dirt. Woo Jin himself took a blast that sent him flying backward, his nervous system on fire with artificial lightning. The survivors dragged their wounded friends back to the camps while the scavengers returned to their work, chattering among themselves. As if nothing had happened, 37 Zelani were injured in the failed assault. 3 would never walk again. That night, as the wounded groaned in makeshift medical tents and children cried from hunger, Elder Vethara climbed to the communication tower. The old equipment, originally used for planetary weather monitoring, could still transmit signals into deep space. She activated the broadcasting array with trembling fingers. The message she recorded wasn't a desperate plea for rescue. She knew by now that the galaxy had written them off as acceptable losses. Instead, she spoke about her people's history, their love of art and music, their commitment to peace and harmony. "We are the Zelani of Kepler 442b, she said into the ancient microphone. "We may not have weapons or warships, but we have stories, we have songs, we have loved our children and cared for our elders. We have tried to live with kindness in our hearts." Her voice carried across the camps, and despite everything, people stopped what they were doing to listen. Even the children fell silent. "If anyone receives this message, please remember us. Remember that we existed, that we tried to be good. Remember that we loved each other until the very end." The transmission beamed into space, carrying the voice of a dying world into the cosmic void. The radiation alarm screamed across the camp as Sang-Woo checked the atmospheric readings one final time. 3 days. That's all they had left before the star's expansion would cook the planet's surface. The remaining Zelani had gathered in the deepest underground shelters, sharing what might be their last meals together. The children should eat. "First," whispered Hyejin, pushing her small portion of protein paste towards 7-year-old Junho. The boy shook his head stubbornly. "I'm not hungry, Nuna," he lied, his stomach growling loudly enough for everyone to hear. Above ground, the scavenger ships continued their work like nothing had changed. They knew exactly how much time was left and planned to strip every valuable component before fleeing to safety. The Zelani meant nothing to them, just obstacles in the way of profitable salvage. That's when Dongwook, monitoring the old sensor array, noticed something impossible on his screens. "Elder Vethara," he called, his voice cracking with exhaustion. "I'm picking up multiple contacts approaching from the outer system." "More scavengers?" she asked wearily. "No, these are different, much bigger formations, and they're broadcasting identification codes I've never seen before. The sensor readings made no sense. Hundreds of ships were approaching at sublight speeds, their energy signatures unlike anything in the galactic databases. The vessels appeared to be a chaotic mix of different designs, some sleek and new, others patched together with obvious repairs. Battle damage scarred many of the hulls as if they'd fought their way across the galaxy. Elder Vethara climbed to the communication center, her aged hands shaking as she activated the receivers. Static filled the speakers for long moments before a voice broke through, speaking accented but understandable galactic standard. "This is Commander Minho of the Terran Humanitarian Fleet, calling Kepler 442b. Elder Vethara, we heard your message. We're here to help." The words hit like a physical blow. Vethara gripped the console to keep from falling, her eyes wide with disbelief. Around the communication center, other Zelani stopped what they were doing and stared at the speakers. Who are you?" Vethara managed to whisper into the microphone. "We're humans from Earth and the Terran colonies," came the reply. "Your transmission reached our space 3 weeks ago. We came as fast as we could." Humans. The Zelani had heard whispers about this new species. Primitives who had barely achieved faster-than-light travel. Newcomers to galactic civilization. They weren't even full members of the Confederation yet. "I don't understand," Vethara said. "Why would you come here? You don't know us. We can offer you nothing in return." Commander Minho's voice carried a warmth that made tears flow down her weathered cheeks. "Elder, when we heard what the Confederation did to your people, every human colony voted the same way. We couldn't live with ourselves knowing we'd left you to die, not when we could do something about it. The human fleet was unlike anything the Zelani had ever seen. Instead of the pristine, identical ships of the Confederation, this armada looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and desperate hope. Cargo haulers had been retrofitted with passenger compartments. Mining. Ships carried improvised life support systems. Even luxury yachts had been stripped down and converted for refugee transport. Commander Minho explained the situation as his ships moved into orbit. "We're not military," he admitted. "Most of us are merchant captains, colonists, even some pirates, who volunteered their ships. When news of your situation reached Earth, our government tried to organize an official response. Too slow, too much bureaucracy. So we organized ourselves. The human ships began landing immediately, their captains ignoring safety protocols in their haste to begin evacuations. Captain Seo Jun brought down a converted freighter that looked like it had been held together with welding tape and prayers. His crew, a mix of Korean colonists and volunteers from a dozen other human settlements, immediately began setting up portable life support equipment. "How many people can your ships carry?" asked Jae-won, the camp's logistics coordinator. Seo Jun scratched his head, looking at his ship with obvious concern. "Officially? Maybe 2,000. But we're not leaving anyone behind, so we'll make room for whatever it takes." The human approach was complete chaos compared to Confederation efficiency. Instead of careful selection criteria and genetic testing, they simply asked, "Who wants to live?" Their ships were overcrowded, dangerous, and running on jury-rigged systems that would never pass a safety inspection. Captain Yuna landed her modified research vessel and immediately began converting her ship's laboratory into a nursery for Zelani children. Her crew worked frantically to install additional air recyclers salvaged from the surface. "The radiation shielding is minimal," she warned Elder Vethara, "and our life support is already running at 150% capacity, but we'll figure it out as we go." The humans had crossed half the galaxy for strangers, stripped their colonies of every available transport, and risked their own lives on ships that were barely spaceworthy. They brought no advanced technology, no military might, no strategic advantage. They brought something the Confederation had forgotten existed, the simple belief that every life mattered. As the first groups of Zelani boarded the human ships, many broke down crying. Not from fear or despair, but from overwhelming gratitude that someone somewhere had cared enough to try. Commander Minho's voice crackled over the communication system. "We've got work to do, people. 2 million souls in less than 3 days. Let's make some miracles happen." The numbers were impossible from the start. Commander Minho stared at his tablet, running calculations for the 100th time. 2 million Zelani, 347 human ships, 72 hours before the planet became uninhabitable. No matter how he arranged the math, it didn't work. "Sir, we're getting reports from the surface," called pilot Sora from the bridge communication station. "Captain Jinwoo says his cargo hauler can fit maybe 3,000 if they remove all the interior walls." "Do it," Minho replied without hesitation. "Tell every ship to strip out everything non-essential. Furniture, crew quarters, cargo containers, all of it goes. We need every cubic meter of space we can get." Down on the planet's surface, the evacuation had become controlled chaos. Hyun-soo supervised the gutting of his mining ship, watching his crew tear out equipment they'd spent years installing. His vessel, the New Soul, had been designed to carry a crew of 30. Now they were cramming in 800 Zelani. "Refugees." "Captain, the air recyclers can't handle this many people," warned his engineer, Boram, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Then we'll breathe lighter," Hyun-soo said grimly. "Install the emergency oxygen canisters from the escape pods. We'll figure out the rest later." The human approach horrified any engineer trained in proper safety protocols. They removed bulkheads that provided structural integrity. They disabled safety systems to redirect power to life support. Ships that should have carried dozens now, packed in hundreds, with people sleeping in shifts because there wasn't enough floor space for everyone to lie down at once. Captain Yeonji watched her crew load Zelani families into what used to be her ship's engine room. The space was cramped, noisy, and filled with dangerous machinery, but it was the only area large enough to accommodate 50 people. "Is this safe?" asked Elder Kethara, one of the Zelani spiritual leaders. Yeonji looked at the jury-rigged life. Support systems, the overcrowded compartments, and the radiation warnings flashing on every screen. "Honestly? No, but it's safer than staying here." The first major crisis hit 18 hours into the evacuation. A massive solar flare erupted from the dying star, sending waves of deadly radiation across the system. 3 human ships caught in. The open during transport runs took direct hits. Captain Dongmin's freighter, the Busan Pride, was halfway to the orbital staging area when the radiation wave struck. Alarm screamed as his ship's primitive shielding failed, flooding the vessel with lethal energy. "Hull breach on Deck 3, shouted his first officer, Young Sik. "Radiation levels are climbing fast." "Seal that section," Dongmin ordered. "Emergency. Protocol 7. Jettison the contaminated compartments." "Sir, that's where we put 200 refugees." The silence on the bridge stretched for agonizing seconds. Then Dongmin grabbed his radiation suit. "Not happening. Get repair teams down there. We don't leave people behind." The human crew worked. In the flooded compartments with minimal protection, welding patches over hull breaches, while radiation cooked their bodies from the inside. By the time they finished repairs, 5 crew members needed immediate medical attention. 2 would never fully recover. But all 200 Zelani survived. Similar scenes played out across the fleet. When Captain Seung Ho's ship lost its main engines, his crew manually carried elderly Zelani up 12 flights of stairs to reach the escape pods. When Captain Min Jung's life support failed, she ordered her crew to share their personal oxygen supplies with refugees, even knowing it left them dangerously short. The Orbital Coordination Center buzzed with desperate activity. Commander Minho and pilot Sora worked alongside Zelani engineers, trying to solve problems that had no good solutions. "We're still short by at least 200,000 people," Sora reported, exhaustion clear in her voice. "Even if every ship runs at maximum overload, we can't fit everyone." Elder Vethara, who had been helping coordinate the evacuation, spoke quietly. "Then we select who stays behind. The oldest, the sick. We'll make that sacrifice so the young ones can live." "No." Minho's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Nobody gets left behind. That's not negotiable." "But the mathematics—" "Math doesn't account for human stubbornness," Minho said with a tired smile. "Sora, send out the word. Every human ship gives up their escape pods. We'll strap them to the outside of the larger vessels if we have to." The AT order was met with immediate compliance. Across the fleet, human crews began removing their own emergency evacuation systems. Life pods that were meant to save human lives in case of disaster were converted into tiny passenger compartments for Zelani families. Captain Tae Young watched his crew install a family of 4 Zelani into his personal escape pod. "What if something goes wrong with our ship?" asked his navigator Ji-un. "Then we fix it," Tae Young replied simply. "That's what humans do." As the star's radiation intensified, human ships began showing signs of severe stress. Metal fatigue caused hull plates to buckle. Overloaded engines exploded, killing their operators. Life support systems failed regularly, forcing crews to perform miracles with spare parts and determination. Elder Vethara found herself working alongside Commander Minho in the main coordination center, watching humans sacrifice themselves piece by piece to save her people. When another solar flare killed the crew of a transport ship while they were evacuating the last refugees from a surface camp, she finally understood what she was witnessing. "Your people are dying for strangers," she whispered to Minho. "Our people are saving lives," he corrected. "That's what makes us human." The countdown timer on Commander Minho's screen showed 4 hours and 17 minutes. 4 hours before Kepler 442b would be consumed by its dying star. The evacuation ships struggled through space like wounded animals, their hulls groaning under impossible loads, while overworked engines leaked radiation into space. Captain Junho's freighter was among the last to leave the planet's surface. His ship, designed for a crew of 20, now carried over 1,000 Zelani refugees packed into every available space. The life support systems screamed warnings, but somehow kept working through sheer human determination and constant repairs. "How? Many more?" Junho asked over the radio, watching another transport struggle into orbit. "That's everyone," came Sora's exhausted voice from the coordination ship. 2,037,016 souls accounted for. Not one left behind. The cost had been devastating. 38 human crew members had died from radiation exposure, equipment failures, and accidents during the frantic evacuation. 7 ships had been lost completely, their crews staying behind to repair critical systems until the very last moment ensuring their refugee passengers could transfer to other vessels before the ships broke apart. Captain Heijin had been among those heroes. When his transport's engines failed during the final approach to orbit, he and his engineer Da-un had worked in the engine room until the radiation killed them, keeping the ship flying just long enough for a rescue vessel to take off his 800 Zilani passengers. The human fleet limped toward the nearest inhabited system, their ships held together by welding patches, prayers, and the stubborn refusal to give up. In the overcrowded compartments, Zilani families huddled together while human crew members shared their own food rations despite being on half supplies themselves. Elder Vethara made her way through the packed corridors of Commander Minho's flagship, marveling at what she saw. In one section, a human medic named So Jin worked around the clock, treating both Zilani and human patients with equal care. In another, crew member Tai Wu had given up his bunk to a Zilani family with young children, choosing to sleep standing up in the engine room instead. "Your people have sacrificed everything for us," Vethara said when she found Minho on the bridge. "Why?" Minho looked exhausted, his uniform stained with sweat and grease from helping with repairs. "Because it was the right thing to do. Sometimes that's reason enough." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent transmission from long-range sensors. "Commander, we're detecting a Confederation fleet moving to intercept us," reported Communications Officer Haiwan. "They're demanding we stop and prepare for boarding." On the main screen, the sleek silver ships of the Galactic Confederation's navy appeared, pristine, powerful, and numerous. Their formation was perfect, their weapons charged, their intent clear. The lead Confederation vessel opened a channel. Captain Jay's cold face appeared on screen, his expression as calculating as ever. "Commander Minho, you are ordered to surrender the Zilani refugees for proper processing. Your unauthorized evacuation has violated multiple galactic treaties." "Processing?" Minho's voice carried a dangerous edge. "You mean like the processing that left 2 million people to die?" "The Confederation's decisions are not subject to review by primitive species," Jay replied dismissively. "Surrender the refugees immediately or face the consequences." The human fleet was no match for Confederation warships. Their converted cargo, haulers and mining vessels, had no weapons, no shields, no chance in a direct fight. Everyone on the bridge knew it. The smart move would be to negotiate, to try to save at least some of the refugees. Instead, Minho activated the fleet-wide communication system and broadcast on all frequencies across known space. "This is Commander Minho of the Terran Humanitarian Fleet, to all ships and stations receiving this transmission. The Galactic Confederation is demanding we surrender 2 million innocent refugees, people they abandoned to die because they weren't deemed valuable enough to save." His voice carried across space, reaching human colonies, alien worlds, trading stations, and pirate bases throughout the galaxy. "These people are under our protection now. They're not cargo to be processed or statistics to be calculated. They're living beings who deserve the chance to survive. Anyone who wants them will have to go through us first." The silence that followed stretched for long minutes. Then, something unexpected happened. Ships began appearing throughout the system, not Confederation vessels but independents. Merchants, colonists, even some reformed pirates who had heard the broadcast. They formed a loose defensive line around the human evacuation fleet. Captain Yun Seo of the trading vessel Lucky Dragon was among the first to arrive. "Confederation fleet, this is an independent convoy under interstellar protection laws. You want to start a war over refugees?" More ships kept coming. The galaxy, it turned out, had been watching, and many didn't like what they saw from the Confederation's cold calculations. Faced with a potential uprising and bad publicity across known space, the Confederation fleet withdrew. Captain Jay's final transmission was filled with barely controlled rage. "This isn't over, humans. The aftermath changed everything. The rescue of the Zilani became legendary across the galaxy, proof that the Confederation's way wasn't the only way." Public pressure forced the galactic government to grant both humanity and the Zilani full membership status, something that normally took centuries to achieve. The Human-Zilani alliance became the foundation for a new approach to galactic civilization. Zilani wisdom about sustainable living and peaceful conflict resolution guided human expansion into space. Human determination and refusal to abandon the vulnerable helped Zilani develop new technologies and confidence. Years later, when young Nari asked Elder Vithara about the day the ships came, the old woman would smile and say, "That's when we learned that compassion isn't weakness, child. Sometimes it's the strongest force in the universe."